Hi, it's David Locke, host of Locked on NBA. Fun conversation coming up with David Thorpe, the author of the book Basketball's Jazz. We're going to walk through a bunch of NBA teams, the Rockets, the Pelicans, the Thunder, the Timberwolves, some other aspects of teams, and how do they build their new offenses with these rosters that have changed so much in the offseason. So a really fun conversation. The Locked On Podcast Network is up and rolling with all your NBA offseason as well as NFL in-season. So make sure you've subscribed to your favorite team's NFL or NBA podcast. And today's show is brought to you by SeatGeek. Use the promo code LOCKED, and you'll get $20 back on your first purchase. But why use SeatGeek? Well, let me tell you what my experience has been. In the old days, I used to have my guy in the side of the hotel, and I'd go in, and I'd look and see him, and I had to kind of believe that whatever tickets he had were the best ones out there, and sometimes I'd check other places, and it'd take a while. Well, now, instead of having to go see the guy in the back room at the hotel, you just download the SeatGeek app on your phone. It's right there for you. It has all the events that you might want to go to. Do you want to travel to go see U2, or as we've been looking at for a possibility to see Hamilton or things of that nature, whatever it might be, or is it just some local concert or a baseball game or an NFL game? Then SeatGeek is the answer. So download the SeatGeek app. Then once you find the event you want to go to, you'll check it out. And what the next thing you'll see is that all the tickets are there compiled in one place for you, so you don't have to go see the guy in the hotel and wonder. And then the next thing you'll find out is that each of those tickets is given a ticket score, so it tells you which tickets are best. Find your ticket. Having downloaded the app, go to the settings tab, enter in the promo code LOCKED. Get your ticket, and then it's secured, and it's on your phone. And that's why SeatGeek is the answer for you. So make sure you download the app, SeatGeek. It's your new place to get tickets. Use the promo code LOCKED, and you'll get $20 back on your first purchase. All right, a lot of fun with David Thorpe. We'll probably be off next week and then back with you. Try to stay with you as we get with Locked On NBA. Here it is, today's edition of Locked On NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Joined by Coach David Thorpe, always a pleasure, author of one book with another on the way. Basketball is Jazz. How's the work on the second one? Easier or harder than the first one?
It's about the same. I've been away a lot this summer, which is probably good, generating a lot more ideas. I went to Tel Aviv for a couple weeks to do a lot of basketball coaching and training, and spent some time with an English Premier League team for a week, the team that I'm involved with. So amazing to see professionals in another sport that are just as professional as the NBA and just as talented. So I'm getting all sorts of cool ideas to share going forward.
I think there's two interesting things going on in the league with all this player movement, and it's why I wanted to have you on Locked on NBA today. Because I think, I know you don't totally agree with this comment, but I was talking to an old coach who last year kind of grumbled, everyone plays the same. That won't be possible this year with the way some of these rosters are made. So I wanted to kind of walk through with what you think styles would be. And then the other one I think is interesting, and it's where I want to start, is I believe that every team will start the season with the same coach it started with last season. How does that impact the league?
Well, you'll have a better idea. I'll take your second question first. You'll have a better idea of what to expect. There's no question most coaches go into a training camp with some ideas they want to play with. There's also very little question, you know this very well, being in the NBA as long as you have with your job, that they tend to abandon whatever new stuff they put in training camp pretty quickly.
Yes.
And that just typically happens. The real innovators, the elite coaches don't. They have come to a decision that we've got to play a little differently, add some twists to what we do, and they'll allow themselves to fail. More importantly, they know they're not going to lose their team when they fail, because those are the guys that ultimately bear the brunt of failure, in addition to the head coach who could also possibly lose his job. The players want to play well. So the best coaches that have security know that we can just play through and figure it out. And a real quick side note on that, this is not so much style of play, but more an example of what I mean. Many years ago, when I was doing Troop with Henry Abbott, we were doing videos, he asked me a question. He said, why is Phil Jackson letting Trevor Ariza take so many threes? This was the year they had Powell and Kobe, and I think that Andrew Bynum was just kind of coming to his own. And Trevor Ariza was really shooting badly. And I had no idea, David, why he was allowing Trevor to keep shooting and missing. I didn't know the man, but I could guess. And my guess was that he knows he needs him defensively and in transition to win a championship. And that means he's got to make sure he's got some kind of offensive weaponry that's available to them to get him on the floor. And the best way Trevor Ariza can help a team is to be able to make threes. He's not going to beat you off the dribble a bunch and all that. And sure enough, against the Magic in the championship series where they won in 5 games, Trevor shot great. In fact, I think he shot well most of those playoffs. And Phil just let him fail. As long as the shot was a good shot, as long as he was putting in time every day on his mechanics and studying film and all of that, you got to let guys fail. So go back to that second question. These coaches, you kind of will know what other teams will do. The smart coaches will realize, okay, here was our tendency last year. Here's some counters we should run. We may not be very good at them initially, but those that are tenured and secure will just stay with it, and those counters will eventually work, and that'll make their regular stuff even better.
You know, you mentioned, to go to the first thing you mentioned, I was with a team once, and I'm going to leave out names on this one. I've been around long enough, I probably can get away with this, where they went through the owner had gotten into the coach's head during the offseason about how he wanted him to play. So they went through an entire training camp. You got to run, you got to be entertaining, you got to be interesting. And they get to, like, the first game, and the coach just absolutely abandons everything they did in all of training camp. So I've witnessed it. I've been at training camps and saw what I thought the team was trying to do, and then watched the team play, and I saw nothing. And that coach got left a couple years later, kind of got himself fired a little bit, and it's just strange how that works. I don't just look at coaches on that, David. I look at management. I look at ownership. Like you just said, you got to support the coach to be innovative. We've seen the most innovative coaches are the ones that have that kind of security. Otherwise, football is the same way, right? There's no different. Really, most sports are. Those that have security are willing to try new things, and that's self-perpetuating in a sense. They're going to be more successful because of that, and that's how they earn the security in the first place. But it has to be given to them sometimes. You got to be willing to take a leap. So I think that when you talk about player movement, let me make sure I address this with you. I did a podcast with Howard Beck right when I came back from Israel and North Carolina, and I said to him that the Kyrie story, more than any other story that's out there this summer, is what I think is an example that kind of started with LeBron and the decision of the beginning. We're still in the first inning, David, of players recognizing that ultimately that it's their league. They have the leverage. I would say it's the coaches' league, but I'm only talking about the impact the great coaches make, and I don't have to defend myself anymore. Every year we see it. Last year with Spoelstra, when you go 11-30 to 30-11 in the same season, that's coaching. They didn't make any huge roster changes and add an all-star. He saved Deion Waiter's career, blah, blah, blah. But it's still a player. The players are the guys that really help the rise and fall more than anyone. They're who the fans are coming to see. And the rest of the world outside of our little continent here, they don't have things like a draft. And they don't just say, okay, you got a 3-year deal, you're stuck here. Those players, like in the English Premier League, for example, and you saw this in the Spanish league, that guy Neymar got his team paid $220 million and got himself $36 million a year to change teams, even though he had a contract. This is what happens. The players have the leverage. I think that we're starting to finally, and this to me is a good thing, our players recognize that they only have a finite number of years to be whoever they can be and make the most money they can while also setting themselves up for the long term, which is they're allowed to do. They're allowed to be business people and demanding things that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do or couldn't do before. I think we're going to see more and more of this going forward. And what's going to happen is you're going to see that the teams that are not really building great cultures and so forth, they're going to be the ones who struggle, and the teams that do will continue to benefit and prosper from it. One thing, this isn't where we intended to go yet, but one thing I think that's worth noting is while the fans sat around complaining about super teams, the league rewarded individual solo performances by Russell Westbrook and James Harden.
Yeah.
And I think that has an impact on Kyrie. I think Klay Thompson at some point may look at things and say, wait a sec, I didn't make All-NBA, and if I'm on Sacramento averaging 26 a game and we go make the playoffs, I do make All-NBA, and my long-term legacy is better. We're rewarding the solo scoring individual player with awards and things of that nature more than we are the team stuff.
I promise I'll get to your first question, which is style of play. I can talk about it all day.
David, I got it organized. We'll walk through actually, let's just do it. We'll walk through the teams. All right, so let's start with – actually, let me just start with quickly on the Kyrie thing. If you were a GM, you empty the warehouse and go get him? You're reticent? What's your feeling on Kyrie?
I think he's a marvelous offensive talent. I think we don't really know how good he can be overall. If he goes to the Spurs, we'll know. I've never loved their coaches. I think LeBron is in some cases that artificial ceiling for other players. Obviously, he also helps them tremendously, but there is a limit to what they can do when he's the man. I use Harden as an example all the time. James Harden's great-great-grandchildren will be able to pay full price to go to an Ivy League school because of the decision Harden made to leave Oklahoma City and go find out if he could be the world's best offensive player, which he might be, right? He's right there. What he's done for himself and his family's fortunes going forward is to be lauded. It's not to be criticized. And by the way, twice he's been on a team that's a 2-3 seed without any All-Stars next to him. I think he's done great. I don't think Kyrie is as good as James Harden, but he'll be better than what he's been if he gets the right coach with the right roster around him. But I wouldn't empty the warehouse. I think he'd be smart to not want to be the best player on a bad team because he's got some pretty significant limitations. He's not a great athlete. He's just okay as an athlete, and that's going to impact what he can do defensively. It doesn't mean he can't get better. I think he can. It doesn't mean he can't be a better playmaker. I think he can be. He's obviously an amazing scorer. And I don't get mad at a guy for wanting to see how good he can be, even if the answer is not so great. He might be great, but not as great as a lot of those other guys. I think it's got to be a smart target. Both. Obviously he would help a team like the Spurs a great deal. He'd be incredible there. If you had to redo it and put him with Boston instead of Isaiah Thomas, that might be a better thing for Kyrie because he might be a little bit better defensively in their system. I think Brad's an amazing defensive coach. But no, I wouldn't just say, okay, we got Kyrie, now we're building, because he's not LeBron. There's so few of those guys. I'm not sure Steph Curry's that guy, by the way. I'm sure Durant is to some degree, and LeBron's the best out there, where everyone just is automatically better because he's on the roster. Kyrie is not. He's not there. He's not James Harden, in my opinion, either.
All right, let's go to style of play with their new rosters. I'm going to start with what I think is probably the least difficult to figure out. That's the Rockets. Mike D'Antoni has been pretty consistent in how he always wants to play, though he slowed down a great deal more last year than people realized to accommodate to Harden. With a lineup that's likely Chris Paul, James Harden, Trevor Ariza, some aspect of Eric Gordon, Clint Capella. They have Nene back. Their bench otherwise is P.J. Tucker's around there, Mbah Moute. So there are a lot of interchangeable parts on that other sequence. Do you think that there's anything unique that Mike D'Antoni has to do offensively to incorporate both Paul and Harden?
Well, let's first go to the old guy's comment that everyone plays the same. Well, that's not true. All right, let's just be clear. That's not even close to being true. And you just are talking about one team that doesn't play like a lot of the other teams are doing. By the way, the reason why a lot of these teams are playing similarly is because it's a kind of a new way to play. And if you want me to go into it, I will. And it's really flipping hard to guard. So that's why more and more teams are doing it. And watch any college game, they're doing it. Because I watch the NBA so much, I started incorporating that style of play. In fact, I call it Spurs action, where it used to be the rule. I was a Bobby Knight guy. My high school coach taught Bobby Knight principles, which meant Hubie Brown principles, which is how the entire free world was playing basketball. All right, which is Hubie Brown, Bobby Knight. That's who developed European basketball. Those guys kept going there and doing clinics. So when you made a pass, the rule was pass, screen away, pass, cut, pass, relocate if you're the guy you threw it to is a penetrate, kick out, playmaker type. Well, what the Spurs, in my opinion, started doing, and maybe someone else did it before, and I just didn't notice it. The Spurs would follow their pass as opposed to going away. They'd follow it and do what we call an influence screen or a brush screen. That chaos created with those two defenders being brought close together and the offensive player with the ball being able to go in either direction is just really, really hard to guard still. And when it's not hard to guard anymore, teams will evolve to something else. Well, there's one team that doesn't do that very much at all, and that's the Rockets, right? Whereas now more and more teams are not just playing what I just described, but also they're trying to move away from the ball. As the ball is being moved, guys that aren't involved with the ball, maybe on the ball side, they're cutting more or they're shaping up more. D'Antoni spaces you out and puts you in a position and gives the ball to his MVP candidate. This is when his teams have been their best, and says, now make a decision, defense. Are you going to send a second guy to my stud with the ball, or are you going to stay home and let my stud try to play one-on-one? He did it with Nash to great effect and 2 MVPs. In my opinion, Harden deserved an MVP this year, as well as a couple years ago when he was playing for McHale, because he's just that good on offense. So that's a little bit different. With Chris Paul, I don't see much different except for this. When you space out on Chris Paul, if you stay home defensively, you're challenging Paul to just score. And he doesn't really want to do that and never has. He can. He's actually a very good one-on-one offensive player. But he's old school quarterback, lead guard, the kind of player that we don't really love in the NBA or really anywhere in basketball, because a lot of times it's 4-on-5 offensively. It's Rubio's biggest problem, which you'll see this year. He's getting better at it. No question he's gotten better with Thibodeau. But D'Antoni, and my guess is going to be, hey, Chris, if everyone's staying home, just cook your guy. Just cook your guy. There's some things they can do for him on ball screens and what have you. Clint Capella diving to the rim is a space creator because you have to shrink to defend that. He can jump to 12.5 feet, 13 feet, dunk the ball. He can finish around the rim, period. And so if you can run pick and roll and Capella dives right to the center of the rim, you're going to force defenders to have to think. If they stay home, you got to dunk. If they shrink, you can play in space out on the perimeter. So I don't think Mike will change very much offensively at all. In fact, other than to say, hey, James, let's pick possessions all game long where you're off the ball resting. You'll still read the game based on what CP does, but we don't have to have the ball in your hands all the time so that you don't die at the end of the season like you did against the Spurs this year.
Well, the other one, and the reason I'm so bullish on the Rockets offensively, is if you take Chris Paul down to 32 minutes, which you should, then Harden's on the floor for 16 minutes by himself. They're only on the floor. You only have to worry about this for 20 minutes a night, right? They're going to play the first 6 minutes, the first 6 minutes, the third, and probably the last 6 minutes of the game together.
Right.
Maybe the last 2 minutes. It's just any idea that that's going to be problematic. It's so little time. You brought up something there I want to touch on that kind of plays. You mentioned Capella rim rolling. I keep hearing when talking about Gobert, both locally and nationally, well, he has no offensive game. And I hear a lot, well, is he going to develop an offensive game? I mean, it's like, why do I want him to develop a 15-foot jump shot where he then has a tendency to pick and pop? When he pick and rolls, Rubio said it the other day. Rubio actually had an interesting quote where he said, I've never played with an offensive player like Rudy Gobert. Why is it so hard for everybody to grasp that the vertical rim rolling is as important spacing as anything else?
Yeah. So, a great question, David. So it's right up my alley because I'm dealing with this. I've got a number of followers or friends on Facebook because I was doing that before Twitter came out, and I ended up doing more basketball discussion on there than Twitter. And I'm involved in a couple, let's call them aggressive dialogues with old school guys who think that an offensive game in the post means you have to be a post player posting up. And I by all means, I like players that can score inside. And I help players from NBA down to European players. I've got a really talented 6'10" Israeli that I'm helping, one of the best young Israelis there. But I also coach a lot of high school kids and so forth now because of my son. We would love for you to be able to get the ball in the post and score. Problem is at the higher levels, it's just so easy to help on that compared to when you and I were growing up watching the games and you couldn't double until the guy had the ball. And then you're flying in. You're not in a good position to begin with to go double. You're running in 15 feet to go get there. He's got time, and then you're off balance when he kicks it out, whatever. It's a harder game to score from down there because you can play zone like you can every other league in the world, and you couldn't do that in the NBA until recently, well, last, decade plus, whatever. So I agree with you. I think that Gobert, I know as Rudy continues to strengthen, because he's such a late bloomer athletically and physically, that he'll get a seal game going better, which is, to me, the most important thing besides being able to jump and catch when you're that size, because now you can make a play above where your defender can get to, and Rudy's gotten very good at that, which is why his rebounding numbers get better too. His hand-eye coordination's better. But if you can learn to seal off rotations, there's no post-game needed because you're going to get an immediate dunk or get fouled typically. So as that improves, that'll be about the extent of what you need from him. It'd be nice if you could throw it down there and have him make a quick move and score before help comes, especially as he's surrounded by shooters, and that forces a defense to make a decision. But ultimately, in my opinion, the rim roll, the speed rim roll, to a guy that can jump to 12, 13 feet is as much a floor spacer as anything because of the shrinkage that it requires to be able to defend it. You've got to just watch games. Any game you want to watch with guys like Rudy and DeAndre Jordan, you're guarding the three-point shooter in the corner or lifting from the wing or dropping from the wing to the corner on that rim roll. You have to make an instantaneous decision. And if you are worried for just that millisecond that your man's going to be open for the three, and that's a three-point shot, not a long two, then that time that you freeze, the dunk is there. And if you commit early to help on the pick and roll right at the rim, your guy gets the open three, you got to pick your poison, right? So we talk about the exquisitely run or exquisitely designed and executed offensive teams take advantage of that. And Rudy can be as effective as anyone in the league because he can get to such a high part on those long passes. And Rubio, by the way, is amazing. I think Ricky's got some offensive flaws that have been ingrained in his DNA from his time in Spain, but one of them isn't feeding the post off dribble drives. He might be the best in basketball at finding ways creatively. And remember this, he was getting sweet dimes to a very gravity-bound Nikola Pekovic in Minnesota when their offense was top 10 in the league, when they had Kevin Martin, Corey Brewer, Kevin Love, and Ricky, who couldn't score, but he was still finding ways to feed Peck at the rim. Rudy is much more agile and much more athletic than Peck ever was.
It's running through the team still with David Thorpe. Let's go to the Thunder. Westbrook, non-shooter, and Robertson. Paul George. I would guess Patrick Patterson's their start fourth with Adams.
Yeah.
Space is tough here. What does Donovan run? What system do you put in? And particularly because you have two very high usage one-on-one players, which actually isn't Paul George's strength. It's a side note. But what do you run with that team? What do they do to what is Billy Donovan sitting in a room right now with his staff trying to figure out how they're going to play this year, trying to put together?
So a couple of things. I don't know that this is as good a fit as some others may be, but I've talked to you before about what made Utah so special in the Jerry Sloan years with not with the obvious guys, but more recently when you had Darren Williams and Brewer at your 1 and 2, and Kira Lake with the 3, and then Okura and Boozer at 4-5, where they ran the flex. And there's many variations of the flex offense, and there's many ways you get into the flex. So there's literally books written, David, about entries into the flex offense. That's probably what they're called. I've seen so many, I don't remember the names anymore. But what made that offense, which I think was the best in the league or second best in the league through a couple of years, was their ability to invert the game, where their guards pulverized you in the paint. And if you remember how angry Darren Williams got when they got rid of Ronnie Brewer, it's because, in my opinion, D. Will thought that management or ownership didn't understand that Brewer was so important to what they were running because he physically just overwhelmed you inside, as did Darren Williams, and then their bigs could flop out and shoot, and Karolinko could do everything. And that flex offense was just impossible to guard. I don't love the flex offense in high school because they don't have 5 guys like the Jazz had. But Oklahoma City can do some interesting things. Robertson is like Brewer. Westbrook obviously is not the same as Darren Williams, but he certainly physically is overwhelming. I don't know what the range of Adams' shot is, but it's something they should be pursuing. Obviously Patterson can really shoot the 3. So that, to me, becomes an interesting way to play for them if they start running the inverted stuff where bigs are out on the floor and guards are playing in tight spaces inside to try to force the shrinkage that way and then kick out. You also have to remember, too, that you have to protect Westbrook on the rim runs that he does in full court and half court. And so you always want to make sure you're featuring him attacking the rim with really that purpose, attack the rim. I mean, the best thing Oklahoma City can do is get Russell to understand what a high percentage shot is. And if you surround him with good enough floor spacers or in the case of Paul George, someone that can slash, you want to run. Remember how Oklahoma City used to run a lot of Westbrook Durant ball screen action in fourth quarters? They could do the same thing with Paul George because that becomes a real challenge for teams. Westbrook can blow by most players, especially at the 3, 4, 5 positions defensively. And Paul George can use his size against smaller guys. So I think you'll see a lot of that, too, late in games.
Let's go to the Pelicans. So this is DeMarcus Cousins, Anthony Davis together, Rajon Rondo, and Drew Holiday. It's fascinating, right? So they've decided that Drew Holiday is a 2. He's actually, like, if you dig into Holiday's numbers, he's a below-average efficiency offensive player. Solomon Hill, I guess they have as their 3 and Twill. If Pondexter, they might shop him. There's some talk, get him back. I don't know.
Yeah.
How does Alvin Gentry, who ironically enough has made his name being part of the exact opposite, build this thing on a chalkboard?
You know, it's. I don't know that there's a team on paper that you could look at and think those guys have no idea what they're doing from an organizational standpoint. I'd love to be proven wrong. I actually am a fan of their guys and want the best for them. But I don't know, honestly, David, I don't know what they're thinking. I've said this publicly before, to me they're the most intriguing team, and this goes right along line with your questioning this morning. They should be the new Grizzlies. They should be horns action, which is both guys in pinch posts, lots of high-low looks between Davis and Cousins, and then 3 40% plus shooters surrounding them at all times, and those guys are on the court. You can play differently when one of them is resting and maybe put a speed unit in there when Davis is in. But Davis and Cousins both are almost unguardable by themselves inside. And Davis has the ability as well, not just to shoot. Cousins can shoot a little bit, of course, but Davis can also do it on the slash. He's just so athletic. And talk about those. Remember when the Magic used to do Dwight Howard, Hito Turkoglu, pick and roll. Dwight would run right to the rim. Rashard Lewis would lift from the weak side. That was their best play in the fourth quarter. That's why Hito was the best fourth quarter player in the league back then. They had a big-time shooter lifting who's got size, and you had Dwight Howard running to the rim. Well, I could see Anthony Davis being used in that capacity, lifting up. You got to make a decision the problem is Rondo, I think, is no good. Solomon Hill is not any good for this, but Drew might be okay at pick and roll action with DeMarcus, run him to the rim, have Anthony lift on the weak side in space. So now if they guard the pick and roll well with Anthony's guy as a helper, you kick to him and let him go make plays. He's good enough as a scorer where if you give him space, he can be real effective. But I wouldn't just do, most of that. I would do a lot of high-low action like Zebo and Gasol used to do and just pulverize teams inside. Play a little slower when they're in the game. And I think DeMarcus can play fast. He doesn't want to. But I wouldn't pair with Anthony Davis. I really like that pairing. I just don't think that the coach and management and roster around him, they've done a great job. They did a great job getting those two together, and I think they failed everywhere since.
One team that has me kind of intrigued, shall we say, and I'll give credit actually here. This is I was talking with our Locked On Raptors host Sean Woodley, and he pointed out to me that Lowry was hurt for almost the whole time that Ibaka was in Toronto, and there was all that talk about cultural reset and everything else. What C.J. Miles now a much better shooting threat than DeMarre Carroll is. Is there any reason the Raptors made a subtle jump here when they get a whole season of Lowry, DeRozan, Ibaka stretching with Miles and Valanciunas, or is that still just a piece or two short?
Well, if guys stay healthy, and we have to see how Powell develops, right, and how their bench overall might play, but I think that's a very good point. I'd like to see growth. I still think DeRozan, I know this. I know DeRozan can become a better shooter. Right, almost everyone can, and he has to some degree. That guy's really improved his game. He couldn't get He knew how to get to the free throw line early in his career. Look at his free throw numbers, over the course of his career. He learned how to be a foul magnet, and that's to be applauded. He's got to be a better shooter. And then Valanciunas, like Rudy Gobert, is a big guy that developed late. He's a powerful, powerful man who at times has been really a force inside. Those guys could still be on their upswing. Masai, a great friend of mine, has done a good job of getting some other younger players that have the upside too. I think it's a little bit premature to say it's a two-horse race in the East with Boston and Cleveland, because I do think the Raptors can be that next team competing right there if they can stay healthy. And Lowry, as good as Lowry is, I had one of my assistants for 14 years is now the youngest head coach in Europe. And his name is Ryan Pannone. He breaks down tape all the time on Twitter and just grabs great plays and puts them up all the time. And he was analyzing Kyle Lowry's three-point shooting and the number of times Kyle Lowry has an uncontested three on the pass, but by the time he gets it off, because he takes two big steps before he shoots, he's now contested, and he shoots so much worse, like most guys do when they're contested. If he could clean that up a little bit and get a little bit quicker release, he ends up being a very good shooter. And, yeah, they become a much more dangerous team. I also think they have a little edge about them if they end up staying together, because I think they're going to be very motivated early on to take that next step. So I think they're a team to watch for.
There's been a few things. We've said something here that's kind of come up a few times. So if you are New Orleans and you're running a Rondo, Anthony Davis, or DeMarcus Cousins pick and roll, probably better Anthony Davis for this conversation, and you're Utah, you're running a Rubio Gobert pick and roll. So if you're running a pick and roll with a point guard that's a sub-optimal shooter, what can you do off? Teams are going to go under and try to – how can it still be successful?
So maybe the first thing we work on with you said suboptimal shooter. I was thinking suboptimal scorer, because that becomes even more problematic. And both Rubio and Rondo are that. Although I still think Ricky is fighting with some bad DNA early on in his career, where they didn't let him shoot the ball. I watched him in his formative years in Spain, and then when he first got to Minnesota, he just never thought shoot. He was the old school lead guard or quarterback like Jacques Vaughn used to play. And it's just that game has changed now. But in terms of shooting, the first thing we do with players that are going underneath screens is we'll make sure we get lots of rescreens. So we want to change angles all the time on the original screen, and then we definitely want to change angles on the reach screen. And the idea would be to try to get momentum. Remember, the whole idea is to get in the paint, right? Offensively, whether it's pick and roll for the roller or pick and roll for the ball handler, we want to try to create that suck down, that shrinkage into the paint, so that we can make plays on the perimeter or just catch and shoot. And the reach screen will help with that a lot. And Ricky knows how to do that. He's been doing that for a long time. I also think Ricky's got the length and the craft to be a better scorer playing downhill. I think he was getting better. You could look up the numbers for playing for Sam Mitchell. I just feel like he's such a bad coach. You're on your own, in my opinion. I don't think he was on his own last year, and that's why I thought he was making some strides. Maybe Tom felt like it was just too much of a pain. I'm not sure Minnesota's better because of the trade. That's for sure. Utah did what they needed to do, and it's going to work out better for them. And I think Rudy's going to see his best offensive season ever, because Ricky Rubio is the best passing point guard that Rudy Gobert has probably ever played with anywhere. So that'll help him some. But yeah, they'll do a lot of I'm sure they'll do a lot of rescreen action with Ricky. And because listen, just because they go under it and you go to shoot it, well, if it's not a wide open three, it's a bad shot anyway, typically, or especially early in a possession. So they don't want, if they go under, they're doing it because they're inviting you to shoot. It's not a good shot for almost anyone to long to, obviously. So I'm sure you'll see early on lots of rescreen action and trying to get Ricky playing downhill and suck the defense in and then play from there.
Final team, and you've mentioned him a few times, is Minnesota. Jeff Teague, Andrew Wiggins, Jimmy Butler, Gorgie Zhang, Karl Anthony Towns are your key. Their bench is pretty, we'll see what Jamal Crawford is and what Taj Gibson are. But it's not a team that can space at all. What do they do offensively?
Well, I think they're going to be an elite offensive team. I think that Thibodeau in Boston, when you broke down the X's and O's, they didn't always execute great, and he's probably to be blamed for that. And in my opinion, it's because he's just so focused on defense. But the stuff that ran was really, really good. Like coaches, we were talking about, wow, they're running great stuff. I think that they will do the same thing this year. I think Wiggins is going to have a career year. I mean, Butler is going to be. I think Wiggins can be a shooter and should be a shooter. The first thing, though, I would stress is running. I would really stress that because I think first I'm a fan of Gorgie Jang. I think he can shoot. I think he and Towns can be very good defensively. A lot of people think they're going to be bad defensively. I don't agree. I've not been right. I never thought they'd be good until they got Thibodeau, and I think they were so bad before. He could only improve them a little bit. I personally think we're going to see a big jump for them defensively, and I think that's going to help their overall offensive game because the transition game will be there. Wiggins is the world's fastest basketball player, at least that I've seen. He can get down to the floor, it seems like, in 3 strides. Jimmy, obviously Butler is an athlete. Teague is super quick and can push pace. Atlanta had some times where they played pretty fast with him, not always. But you don't have to take a quick shot. We're seeing sometimes with pace, we're seeing a slower pace than what people probably predicted. But all it means is they're just being more selective with their shooting. They're still trying to race the floor and make plays. Towns can really run. Both those bigs can invert. They're another team that I think can run some flex stuff because Jane can shoot and Towns can shoot. And I think Butler can kick your butt inside and so can Wiggins. Teague can't. Teague's the one guy that can't do it. But your 2 and 3 can. So, and then on the second unit, Jamal Crawford normally just, give him the ball and go play. I mean, I don't love that. Taj is obviously just a solid player. I'm not sure how good their bench will be, and that's a big question. But I think their offensive unit can be elite. I really do, David. And if it's not, then there's something wrong. And then maybe Thibodeau is overrated because they have no excuse. So these guys should be ready to make a big jump this year and be an absolute playoff. If they're not a playoff team, heads should roll.
On that note, we'll leave Coach Thorpe. Great stuff. Basketball is Jazz is the book. Grab it if you haven't. Some fun summer reading while doing what David's doing right now, which is sitting out by the pool, looking at some good, blue skies, probably a little humid out there. So, David, always a pleasure to talk basketball. Fun kind of off-season chalkboard effort today. And thanks so much for your time.
Look forward to it, David. Talk soon, man.